When my parents told me we were moving to Gravenmoor, I didn't think much of it. It was just another small town, tucked away between fog-draped hills and crooked forests, the kind of place no one visits unless they have family there. The first few days seemed normal enough. People nodded politely but rarely spoke. The town square was quiet, with a cafe that smelled faintly of burnt coffee, a small grocery that looked older than my grandfather, and a clock tower that seemed to lean toward the earth, as if burdened by its own secrets. But then, things began to change. One afternoon, I walked down a narrow street where a toy shop had caught my eye the day before. It had a cracked window with faded dolls staring out, their glass eyes fogged with dust. But when I arrived, the shop was gone. Not closed, gone. In its place was nothing but an empty lot, as if the building had never existed. I asked a woman passing by, an old lady clutching her shawl tight around her shoulders. "Excuse me," I said. "Wasn't there a toy shop here yesterday?" Her eyes darted to mine, wide with something I couldn't place. Fear? Warning? She shook her head quickly, whispering, "There's never been one." Then she hurried away, shoes scraping against the cobblestones. That night, I told my parents. "There's no toy shop in Gravenmoor, Daniel," my father said, frowning. My mother added, "You must have imagined it." But I knew what I'd seen. The next day, it wasn't just the toy shop. The cafe where I had watched a man stir sugar into his coffee, gone. The benches in the square, replaced by nothing but cracked stone. The strangest thing was that no one seemed to notice. The townsfolk moved on as if the world were exactly as it should be. Only I seemed to remember the missing places. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. How can something simply vanish? Not destroyed, not abandoned, but erased, like chalk wiped clean from a board. I pulled the blanket tighter and whispered to myself, trying to calm down. Tomorrow, I'll walk every street. I'll write down everything I see. If it vanishes again, I'll have proof. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Gravenmoor was not a normal town. It was hiding something it didn't want me to find. The next morning, I set out determined to map the streets. I carried a small notebook, scribbling down every corner, every shop, every building that seemed fixed in place. My parents thought I was being childish, but I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that Gravenmoor was slipping through my fingers like sand. The town looked deceptively calm at first. Mist hung low. The houses with their gray roofs and shuttered windows lined the streets like mourners at a funeral. But as I walked, I noticed something else. The people. The adults kept indoors. Their curtains were always drawn, their front doors locked, even in the middle of the day. When I did catch sight of them, it was only for a moment, a pale face peeking from behind glass, or the quick shuffle of feet retreating inside. And when they did speak, their voices never rose above a whisper. It was as if the very air of Gravenmoor punished sound. Conversations ended when I came too close, and the eyes that followed me were wary, guarded, almost resentful. But the children, they were different. I first noticed them by the churchyard, sitting on a low stone wall with their legs dangling. 3 of them, no older than 10 or 11, just staring at me. Their lips pressed tight, eyes wide, as if they had rehearsed this silence together. I raised a hand. "Hi," I said. "I'm Daniel." They blinked at me, but didn't reply. Not a single word. Then, all at once, they slid off the wall and ran down the lane, their feet tapping against the stones like the echo of rain. I followed them, but the children in Gravenmoor were like shadows. They slipped into alleys, behind fences, into hidden paths between houses. No matter how fast I moved, they were always a step ahead, always disappearing just around the corner. By the time I stopped, panting, I was on a street I hadn't seen before. It wasn't in my notebook. And when I turned to go back, the way I had come was gone. The street behind me had dissolved into fog, leaving me stranded in a lane that curved into darkness. The houses here looked different too, taller, leaning closer, as though they wanted to press their roofs together and block out the sky. I froze when I heard it, a window creaking open above me. An old man leaned out, his face gaunt, his eyes bloodshot. He hissed down in a voice barely audible. "Go home, boy. You shouldn't be here. Not when the children are watching." Then he slammed the shutters so hard that dust rained down from the frame. I didn't need telling twice. My legs carried me back the way I thought I came. By some miracle, the mist thinned, and the familiar square emerged once more. That night, when I asked my mother why the children in town never spoke, she grew pale and shook her head. "They know better," she whispered. "They know what happens if they don't keep silent." I pressed her for more, but she wouldn't say another word. My father told me to drop it, his face hard and unreadable. But I couldn't drop it, because in that moment, I remembered something. When the children had stared at me by the churchyard, their lips hadn't been sealed in fear. They had been sealed in warning. They were trying to tell me something without speaking, and I had no idea what it was. The days bled together in Gravenmoor, each one quieter than the last. But if there was one constant, it was the clock tower in the center of town. It stood higher than any building, its blackened stone flecked with moss and cracks. The great brass hands rusted into a crooked angle. People never looked at it, never mentioned it, as if it didn't exist. But I couldn't ignore it. Every night, just before I went to sleep, I'd hear its deep toll. 11 times, then 12, and then one more. 13. I thought it was broken at first, some mechanical error. But no matter where I was in the house, the sound reached me clearly, like it was inside the walls. The 13th chime didn't echo like the others. It lingered, heavy, like a note that didn't belong in any song. And after it faded, that was when I heard them. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Moving along the street outside our window. At first, I told myself it was just a late-night wanderer. But the sound wasn't right. Each step landed in perfect rhythm, too steady like a metronome. The scrape of a heel, the press of a sole, the pause, then again. And always coming closer. One night, I couldn't resist. When the 13th toll struck, I crept to the window, heart hammering against my ribs. The street was empty, but the footsteps didn't stop. They grew louder until I swore they were right outside. I pressed my face to the glass, breath fogging the pain. Nothing. And then the sound paused. Right beneath my window. I held my breath. For a long, dreadful moment, there was only silence. Then, slow and deliberate, the footsteps turned and walked away, fading into the night until only the whisper of the wind remained. The next morning, I asked my father if he had heard it too. He shook his head, avoiding my eyes. "There are no footsteps in Gravenmoor after midnight," he said firmly, as if reciting a rule. But later that day, as I passed the square, I caught sight of something carved faintly into the base of the clock tower. Words etched deep, almost erased by time. "When the 13th bell tolls, do not answer the sound." I traced the letters with my finger, my pulse racing. Who had written them? And what would happen if I did answer? That night, lying awake, I waited again. 11, 12, 13. The sound rolled through me like thunder. And then, the footsteps. This time, they stopped sooner, right outside my door. And then, for the first time, I heard something else. A voice. Low, hollow, drifting through the silence like smoke. Daniel. My name. Spoken by no one. I barely slept after hearing my name whispered outside the door. By morning, I convinced myself it had been a dream, the mind playing tricks after too much dread. But deep down, I knew better. That afternoon, wandering the edges of the town, I met him. He was sitting on the steps of the dried-up fountain in the square, a boy maybe my age, maybe a little older. His clothes were worn, his eyes pale gray, almost silver, like storm clouds that never broke. "You're new here," he said quietly. His voice was barely more than a murmur, but in a place like Gravenmoor, even whispers felt like shouts. "Yeah," I admitted. "I'm Daniel." The boy flinched, glancing around as though I had just broken some sacred rule. He leaned closer, lips trembling. "Don't say your name here. Not at night. Not after the clock." I frowned. "Why? What happens?" He swallowed, looking down at his hands. "If you speak a name after midnight, the town hears it, and the person whose name you spoke will be gone by dawn." I laughed nervously. "That's ridiculous. A ghost story." His eyes met mine, and there was no humor in them. "Then tell me, why do you think no one here uses names after dark?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I thought back to the children, their silence, their lips pressed shut as if sealed by invisible hands. The boy's voice dropped even lower. You don't believe me? Then think. Think about last night. Didn't something call to you? A chill ran through me. How do you know that? He didn't answer. Instead, he stood and began to walk away. But just before he vanished into the mist, he turned and whispered, My name is Oliver. Remember it, but don't ever say it after midnight. His warning stayed with me, echoing in my mind like the 13th toll of the clock. I tried to push it away, to convince myself it was just superstition. But that evening, at dinner, something slipped. My father was tired, his eyes ringed with shadows. He barely touched his food. Without thinking, I asked, Are you all right, Dad? And then, softly, I added, Michael. The name was out before I realized what I had done. Spoken aloud. After midnight had passed, I froze. The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother's fork clattered against her plate, her face drained of color. My father looked at me strangely, as if from very far away. The next morning, he did not wake up. His chest didn't rise. His body was there, but he was gone. And when I ran, panicked to the square, I saw it. On the stone wall of the square, beneath the clock tower, names were carved in neat, cruel lines. The newest name glowed faintly in the morning mist. Michael Hardrove, my father. And just beneath it, the stone shifted as if being written by an invisible hand. Slowly, painfully, new letters etched themselves into the rock. Daniel Hardrove, my name, waiting to be finished. The first time I saw my father's name carved into the stone, I wanted to believe it was some cruel trick, a prank played by the silent children, or maybe even my own tired mind imagining what it feared most. But the letters were there, cold, jagged, etched deep into the wall as if the rock itself had swallowed his life whole. And beneath it, my own. The name wasn't finished yet. Only the first half of Daniel shimmered faintly, like it was being written one letter at a time by an unseen hand. But it was enough. Enough to tell me that I was no longer just a visitor here. I was part of the town. I didn't know what to do. My mother refused to leave the house. She sat by the window, clutching her rosary, lips moving silently, endlessly. I asked her about the wall, about the rules, about what Gravenmoor really was, but she only whispered one word. Names! She wouldn't say more. So I went back to the square alone. The wall stretched wider than I'd noticed before, curving along the base of the clock tower. Dozens, no, hundreds of names filled its surface. Some old and nearly eroded, others sharp and new, glowing faintly like fresh wounds. I ran my fingers across them, feeling the grooves. Each name was different, but the stone held them all the same way. Final, unyielding, eternal. I stopped at one in particular. Oliver Gray. The letters were there, carved clean, but unlike the others, his name didn't glow. It was dull, lifeless, as if abandoned. And yet Oliver still walked the streets. I'd spoken to him. Why hadn't he vanished? A sound broke the silence, the scrape of shoes against stone. I spun around. Oliver stood there, half in shadow, watching me. His face was pale, his expression unreadable. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. Why is your name on the wall? I demanded. Why are you still here if it's carved? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice. Because I broke the rule. I said my own name after midnight. And when you do that, you don't vanish. You stay, but you don't belong to yourself anymore. His eyes caught the dim light of the square, and for the first time, I noticed something in them. Not just sorrow, but emptiness, like something had been taken and never returned. The wall writes the truth, Oliver whispered. Once your name begins to carve itself there, it cannot be stopped. Unless... He trailed off, looking toward the clock tower. Unless what? I pressed. His lips trembled. Unless the 13th bell is silenced. But no one has ever managed it. And those who try... He stopped, shaking his head. They never come back. I wanted to ask more, but just then the clock struck. The sound reverberated through the square, each toll louder than the last. 11, 12, and then the 13th. The stone wall trembled. Dust fell from its surface, and I watched in horror as the next letter of my name etched itself deeper. D-A-N-I. The rest would come soon. Oliver's voice was barely a breath. You don't have much time. That night, I begged my mother to leave with me. We have to go, I whispered. We can't stay here. Not with the wall. Not with Dad gone. Her face was pale in the candlelight. She shook her head slowly, her eyes empty. No one leaves Gravenmoor. But we could try. We can. Her hand shot out, gripping mine with surprising force. Daniel, you don't understand. The road doesn't go anywhere. Once you enter, you're already trapped. I wanted to argue, but deep inside, I knew she was telling the truth. Still, the thought of doing nothing while my name carved itself into stone was unbearable. So at dawn, before she woke, I packed a bag and ran. The road out of town was long and crooked, bordered by gray hedges and fields that seemed to stretch on forever. I kept walking, pushing forward even when the mist thickened, even when the silence grew so heavy it felt like a weight pressing against my skull. For hours I walked, but when the mist finally thinned, I froze. Ahead of me was Gravenmoor, the square, the clock tower, the same crooked houses leaning toward one another. I had come full circle. Panic surged through me. I ran faster, turning onto another road that twisted between hills. Again and again, I walked until my legs screamed. Again and again, the town reappeared before me, waiting like a predator. By the third time, I collapsed in the dirt, gasping for air. My bag felt heavier than stone. My notebook slipped from my hand and fell open. The map I had drawn of the streets was changing on its own, the ink shifting, lines bending, as though the town was rewriting itself in front of me. That's when I heard him. Now you know, Oliver said. He was standing a few feet away, his gray eyes calm, almost pitying. No one escapes. Gravenmoor doesn't let go. I slammed my fist into the ground. There has to be a way. You said the clock. Oliver nodded slowly. The 13th bell. It keeps the town breathing. If it falls silent, maybe the grip will break. I stared at the tower rising in the distance, its spire cutting through the mist like a blade. How? I asked. His expression darkened. No one knows. Those who tried never spoke again. Some say their names were swallowed whole, erased even from the wall, as if they never lived. The thought chilled me, but I forced myself to stand. Then I'll try. I don't care what happens. I won't wait for my name to finish carving. Oliver looked at me for a long moment. His lips parted as though to warn me again, but instead he simply whispered, Then don't wait too long. Tonight, the wall will finish writing you. I swallowed hard. It was already evening, and the clock tower was waiting. The square was deserted when I returned. Windows shuttered, doors bolted, the town holding its breath. Only the clock tower loomed above me, its black stone slick with mist, the broken hands pointing nowhere. I stood at its base, staring up at the narrow wooden door. It wasn't locked. It never had been. No one needed to keep it locked. The air inside smelled of rust and dust, like a place long abandoned. The staircase was spiral, winding upward into shadows. Each step groaned beneath my feet, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the silence pressing in from all sides. Halfway up, I began to hear it, the faint ticking. Slow, relentless. A heartbeat carved into gears and stone. It echoed inside my skull, guiding me higher. At last, I reached the chamber. The great bell hung above, cracked but whole, its surface blackened as though by fire. Chains dangled from its frame, swaying though there was no wind. Below it, a machine of iron and gears turned with impossible precision, the pendulum swinging back and forth with unnatural rhythm. And then I saw it, the wall. Inside the tower, another wall of names spread across the stone, larger than the one outside, stretching floor to ceiling. And there, carved deeper than all the rest, glowing faintly in the dark, Daniel Hargrove. The name was almost complete now. Just one letter left unfinished. A chill tore through me. If the 13th bell rang again, the wall would finish the job. I stepped toward the machine. The gears churned, teeth grinding against each other. The pendulum swung, counting down the seconds until midnight. My hand shook. I grabbed a loose pipe from the floor, raised it, and slammed it into the gears. The sound was deafening in the silence. Metal shrieked, sparks flew. The pendulum shuddered, slowing. But then something moved behind me. I spun. Figures filled the tower chamber, pale shapes slipping from the shadows. The townsfolk, their faces blank, their eyes hollow. They didn't speak. They only pointed at me. And then, all together, they whispered, "Daniel." The 13th toll struck. The sound split the air, shaking the stones beneath my feet. The unfinished letter on the wall seared itself into place. My name glowed brighter than all the others. I screamed, slamming the pipe again into the gears. This time, something broke. The pendulum froze mid-swing. The bell trembled. And then, silence. Real silence. No chime. No ticking. Nothing. For the first time since I'd arrived, Gravenmoor held no sound at all. The figures vanished. The wall of names dimmed, as though the light had been snuffed out. Even my own name faded, crumbling away letter by letter until the stone was blank. I stumbled backward, gasping, staring at the bell above me. It swayed once, groaned, and then cracked clean down the middle. The silence shattered into darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was standing on the road outside Gravenmoor. The town was gone. Only empty fields stretched to the horizon. I was free, but in the distance, carried on a wind that didn't exist, I thought I heard it. A single toll, the 13th, and a whisper that curled around me like smoke. "Daniel,